Hi, what are you doing here in my kitchen? Are you an intruder? Are you an observer? Are you a figment of my imagination? I'm not sure. However, I'll let you stick around because I'm here to talk about food. Things like pineapples and sacks of sauerkraut. But before we start cooking, I'm going to do the first most important step that I'm sure you're aware of, but I really want to hammer this home. And when I say hammer, I mean get hammered. Make sure you pour yourself a beverage. Now, when we're talking about beverages, anything will do. Whatever strikes your fancy. Maybe you like some Jack Daniels. Maybe you like some Pinot Grigio. Me, I like a good beer. And a good beer is Rumpenheim from H.H. Hinder Brewing Company. I'm going to pour myself a pint right here, and it's going to be good. Lovely. Good stuff. Alright, now we got to get down to business. We've been fooling around too long, pouring beers, doing take after take. Tomorrow is Easter. And in years past, for Easter, my grandmother would make pierogi. But I need to talk to you a little bit first about the proper tools, the proper garb. And that's really the most important thing. Because you can't make pierogi without a babushka. So, here we go. It ain't much of a babushka, but it's all I got. The other things that you're gonna need are a backup plan. That's the first thing that you need. So if these pierogi come out terrible, and we still want a somewhat authentic Easter experience, make sure you've got some kielbasa, you know? Another thing I should point out before we really dig into this thing is that I'm gonna break this down into 2 days of cooking. So tonight, I'm gonna make the guts of the pierogi, the innards, if you will. Tomorrow, I'm gonna make the sacks. That doesn't sound that appetizing. The pasta part, okay? So, my grandmother would do it all in one shot, but I don't have the stamina. I don't have the grandma's stamina, or the gramina, if you will. Now, let's talk about ingredients a little bit. You'll notice an array of things here, very few of which are really traditional the way my grandmother used to do it. I found some stuff on the internet, and it looked pretty good to me, but I'm kind of gonna wing it. So I've got some stuff, I'm gonna make a few different fillings, and see how it turns out. So here's my first recommendation. Get yourself sauerkraut in a bag. Comes in cans, comes in jars. Don't get the jars. I think I gave myself a hernia last time I tried to open a jar of sauerkraut. So much easier with the bag. I don't know if it's better, I don't know if it's worse, but it's a heck of a lot easier. Now, I went and I got myself some bacon. These recipes I found use a lot of bacon. I don't remember my grandmother ever using bacon, at least not in pierogi, but I'm going to. The other thing, this is an ingredient, this is a tool. My grandmother never had one of these. This is what they call a Sudoku knife. It was invented by the same idiot that came up with that stupid math game. And I think the point is that it's so mathematically oriented, it helps you dice things better. It gives you more precise measurements. It helps you remember the correct quantities for everything in the recipe because it's got that mathematical connection. So use one of these. It's got those little funny divots in there. Sudoku knife. Alright people, this is where it starts getting real. I'm going to lay into some potatoes because one of the fillings I'm going to make is this potato bacon-y kind of stuff. So you gotta peel some potatoes. Just like to make an omelet. Oh, look at that. I peel the first one and there's some like ugly looking brown nodule in there. Well, that's not good. This wouldn't happen on the Martha Stewart show. Okay, I got past my issue with that one potato and I've proceeded to peel a couple more. I've only got 3 of them because I guess I just wasn't that ambitious. I didn't want to make the 15 pounds of potatoes or whatever it was the recipe called for. So I'm working with 3. And I've got a cool little trick that I discovered that I'll share with you that maybe you've never seen before. Maybe I'm the first person to ever wield a knife in exactly this manner. But my nifty little friend here, the Sudoku knife, it's got this kind of like little notch angle thing back here that works great for poking out these little knobs that are left when you peel the potato. This is where these, I guess you call them the eye sockets. Okay, now I've got 3 peeled and washed potatoes. Washing the potatoes is important. And the other thing that's important during this time of crisis in which we're all under lockdown is don't touch your face with the potatoes. Unless that's part of the recipe or if it's tradition in your family, I don't know. But at least for this weekend, don't touch your face with the potato. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut these up. They need to go in a pot of water and we're gonna boil them. You don't really need to see me filling up a pot of water. I'm sure you know how to do that. And frankly, you probably know how to cut up a potato too. I don't know if this technique is right, but I just figure that they'll cook quicker this way. Again, maybe this is unorthodox, maybe it's illegal, maybe it's insanity. I'm not sure. But I'm gonna cut these suckers up because I don't have time for sitting around all day waiting for potatoes to cook. We've got our potatoes cut. They're in a pot of water. Now before I start them boiling, I'm gonna add just a little bit of salt because you're not gonna be seeing your family this weekend. You gotta do something to elevate your blood pressure. So we're gonna use ample salt. All right, so I've got this recipe for potato filling. It talks about potatoes, it talks about bacon. It doesn't say a damn thing about cheese. But this is Wisconsin. We're putting cheese in here. So I'm gonna grate some cheese. Oh man, I told you there would be a catastrophe. Here we go, grating cheese. You don't really need to see this process. If you don't know how to grate cheese, then you probably don't know how to operate your computer either. You probably don't know how to go to YouTube. You probably don't know how to feed yourself. There, is that enough cheese? Hell no. Is there such a thing as enough cheese? Probably, but not in this world. All right, now before we go any further, let me say a couple more words about cheese. I grated some nice, aged, sharp cheddar cheese. Mild cheddar? Come on, really? What's the point? You might as well use Kraft singles. Use some good cheese, all right? All right, another one of the recipes I got off the internet is for sauerkraut filling. Doesn't say anything about mushrooms, but I like mushrooms. I've had pierogi with sauerkraut and mushrooms before, so I'm gonna cut up some mushrooms and add that to it. Why the heck not? And the other thing that I would point out is I'm gonna cut these up pretty darn small. You don't want gigantic mushrooms in here. You want nice little pieces. There, that's the last of the mushrooms. Put them all in a bowl, put them aside for now. Now, while the potatoes are boiling, I'm gonna deal with the sauerkraut. The recipe says drained, rinsed, and minced. So this is advanced technique now. I've never minced sauerkraut before. In fact, I usually don't drain and rinse it either, because to me, I feel like you're rinsing away the flavor. But I'm gonna go ahead and do it by the book or by the printout from the internet. Now, you'll notice that I made this big thing about how hard it was to open a jar. Let's see how easy it is to open this bag. It's actually pretty easy, but I think I'm gonna make a mess because I'm gonna use the Sudoku knife again. Let's just slip this thing open. Oh yeah, there's the mess. Now here's something to ponder. How do you mince sauerkraut? Is it like mincing words? Is it like mincing meat? Is it like mint? The stuff that they put in chewing gum. Is it like the mint where they make money? I don't know. Let's find out. Here we go. I'm gonna start mincing. This looks a little weird. Now you'll notice that I used this pair of tongs here to grab the sauerkraut. That was really just because I'm going on video. In real life, I would just go like I'm bobbing for apples. I would take a mouthful at a time and just spit it out on the board. But let's mince. Ooh, that's got a nice feel to it. You can just feel it like chopping through that crunchy sauerkraut. There's something very satisfying, it turns out, about mincing sauerkraut. There you have it, a whole mess of minced sauerkraut. Next, we'll start cooking the bacon. Now the bacon goes into two of the fillings that I'm working on. The sauerkraut and the potato. Alright, the potatoes are boiling away. They're just about done. I'm gonna start this bacon cooking, so we are multitasking. Here's a word of advice from me and the CDC to you. Wash your hands after handling the bacon. Don't put it on your face or anybody else's face. Alright, the bacon is starting to sizzle and the potatoes are done, so I drained the water off them and now I'm gonna mash them. This is the fun part. This is at least as much fun as mincing sauerkraut and almost as messy because some of these potatoes just went flying. It occurs to me that this is a pretty good time to add the cheese to these potatoes. They're nice and hot, the cheese will melt. At least that's my theory. Let's give it a try. Hello, cheese. Meat potatoes. Let's give this stuff a stir, get this cheese mixed in here. I don't know about you, but I might want to add a little milk to this. Smooth it out a little bit. The recipe doesn't say anything about milk, but you know, sometimes recipes don't know what they're talking about. Don't forget the bacon. Let's see how it's doing. It's got a little ways to go yet. And it's back to the cheesy potatoes. Let's get this all mixed in. Looks like the cheese is melting pretty good. Looks pretty good. That was not enough cheese. Thus, I'm adding more. We're allowed to do that. We can make changes on the fly. And that's what I'm gonna do. Grate a little bit more cheese. Time to pull this bacon out of the pan. Some of it is getting a little brown. That's about right. It's not burnt, but it should be nice and crispy. Just the way I like it, especially when I have to crumble it. Alright, that bacon came out perfectly. It's got to drain a little bit, it's got to cool a little bit, and then I'll be ready to crumble it up. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit more milk to this, smooth them out, and then I'm going to have at it with the immersion blender and really smooth it out. And probably also make a mess, so be ready. This makes some really cool sounds. Hey, I have an idea, and I have another beer, but more important right now is the other idea. The idea I have is I've still got these mushrooms I need to cook, and I've got a pan filled with bacon fat. So, I'm gonna cook the mushrooms in the bacon fat. Good idea, huh? Alright, it's dual action time on the stove right now. I've got a couple things that I have to cook. One of them is the minced sauerkraut, into which I will incorporate some crumbled bacon. And And the other one is the aforementioned mushrooms, which I'll put in the bacon fat. Let's fire this sucker up. Throw the shrooms in there. Those are going to be some good shrooms. And while those things are starting to cook, I'm going to crumble up some of this bacon. I'm going to crumble that. It's not all that crumbly. You know what? I'm going to chop this up. That's what I'll do. I'll rescue this little guy and sample him. Okay, I'm going to chop up this bacon so I can incorporate this into the potato filling. And it should be in nice little, tiny little pieces. Alright. I added my crumbled bacon to the potato mixture. And now I'm just going to mix that up a little bit more. So, a little salt, a little pepper. Not sure how much that was, maybe a quarter teaspoon of each. Alright, the mushrooms are cooking. Give them a little stir. They're looking pretty good. Let them keep on going. And over here, you can't even see in there, but I'm going to dump the bacon into the sauerkraut. Alright, now I do believe that these mushrooms are done. I tasted them a little bit too, and they're definitely very bacony. And bacony means good. Alright, here's our sauerkraut, and I'm just sort of heating this up a little bit. It doesn't really need to be cooked, but I figure it's a good way to incorporate the flavors. Got some bacon in there, and we're about to have some mushrooms. So here they go. Mushrooms away. Can you see that? Here we go. Mushrooms. Into the sauerkraut they go. This is gonna be delicious, I can tell. Let's throw a little pepper in there. Why the hell not? Alright, here we have the ingredients that we will use tomorrow. Wait a minute, we? I mean me. You guys aren't going to be doing this stuff, you're just going to be sitting there watching. Which is fair enough because you don't get to eat any. So these are the ingredients that I'm going to be stuffing into pierogi tomorrow. These are the innards. We've got the sauerkraut with the mushrooms and the bacon. We've got the potatoes with the cheddar and the bacon. And you might notice this can sitting here, dead center. So this stuff here, this is actually the best of all the pierogi ingredients. And it's the one that requires the least work, because all you have to do is buy it off the store shelf. Now these days, you have to go in with a babushka over your face and gloves on. You gotta stay 6 feet away from people. You gotta make sure that you don't sneeze or cough or any of that kind of stuff, or they come and they cart you away, I guess. But this stuff, it's actually a different brand than I think my grandma used to use, but she never made this stuff from scratch. This she always used in a can, and it was fine with me. As a kid, this stuff was great, and keeps you regular. Now, stay tuned because I'm gonna pick this up in the morning with the creation of the, I still can't find a good word for it, the actual holding vessel of all this goodness that's gonna go into the pierogi. It is the wrapper of the pierogi. It's what indeed makes it a pierogi. Alright, it's Easter morning, ready to continue making the pierogi, but first, an Easter song. Egg. Alright, now I mentioned this yesterday. It's important to get yourself a good beverage if you're going to be cooking. Because, at least for me, it's a very trying experience. So you need something to keep you comforted. And at this time on a Sunday morning, yeah, it's 10 o'clock already, but I need more coffee. So pour yourself some coffee. It's good for you. Stay hydrated, stay caffeinated. Not necessarily in that order. Okay, so it appears that making the pierogi dough is pretty straightforward, at least in terms of ingredients. You're going to need some flour. You're going to need a rolling pin. You're going to need a couple of EGGs. You're going to need some bowls. And really, it sounds like it's not so much the supplies and the ingredients and the tools that's tricky. It's going to be the technique. And I have no technique. So we'll see how this goes. Now what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make a double recipe of pierogi dough. Because I made a lot of fillings. However, instead of doubling up the recipe, I'm going to make two different recipes because I think it's going to be too much to mix in one bowl. So I'm going to make it once, I'm going to make it a second time. And we'll see how that goes. The recipe calls for 3 cups of flour, 1 egg, a pinch of salt, and an 8-ounce glass of water. Personally, I think it's wise to crack and whisk the eggs in advance. So that's what I'm going to do. And just remember, making pierogies is not without whisk. The next step is dealing with the flour. I need 3 cups of it, and according to the recipe, it should be sifted flour, which frankly I think is a pain in the butt, but let's not cut corners. I'll go ahead and sift the flour. Maybe this is the key to making good pierogi. The pierogi key. And there's the 3rd cup. And actually, that wasn't that bad. That was pretty easy. Sifted flour, the sift that keeps on giving. And now, a pinch of salt. 8 ounces of water. Got my flour, got my egg, got my water. It's time to put these things together. So I'm going to pour the egg in here, scrape that out, and make sure we've got enough liquid. I'm going to start folding this together. Now there's nothing in my recipe that really instructs on how to mix this stuff. It just says mix it. I don't know if that means use a beater. But I do suspect that you don't want to overmix things. So I'm going to try to do this gently, a little bit at a time, adding some water now, just kind of folding it in. And you know, if you've never done this before, this is the blind leading the blind, to be sure. This might come out terrible, because honestly, I don't really know what the consistency of this dough should be. It shouldn't be too thin, you'll never be able to roll it out. And if it's too thick, you'll have a hell of a time rolling it out. Okay, so I added a smidge more water, so I probably ended up using more like 10, 11 ounces instead of 8. But that ball of dough, to me, seems about right. Okay, now here comes the fun part, and also the adventurous part, the tricky part, the frightening part, the part where we roll out the dough and see if we can assemble these things okay. So, come along for the ride. Now for this, you're going to have 2 best friends. Rolling pin and flour. What you need to do is get a good sprinkling of flour on your rolling surface, because this stuff is going to stick. The flour is going to prevent that. So you get some on your hands, get some on your rolling pin, get some down on your nice clean counter. Alright, so I'm going to scoop this out. You can see how sticky it is. Maybe I added a little bit too much water, we'll see. But the flour that it picks up along the way is going to toughen it up, so it's probably going to be alright. Get a little on there. Start handing it down. Now, hopefully you can see this. We're going to roll. Take it nice and easy. Try to keep things flat and even. You want to go back and forth. Kind of like that. If you see things sticking, put a little more flour down. Just take it slow, a little at a time. You want to get it pretty decently thin, but not too thin. Okay, that dough looks pretty good. I'm going to start cutting my first few pierogies. This would be great if I had a custom-made or a purpose-made cutter for this. I'm going to use this little bowl to cut little circles. And again, I'm going to flour this thing, and I don't know how well this is going to work, so let's just give it a try. Press down, pull up. Ooh, that thing's kind of stuck, but that's not bad. I'm going to set it aside on a little piece of wax paper here, and I'm going to keep on cutting. Okay, so I cut 15 circles out of the first batch. Now I've got this scrap dough, which I'm going to gather back up into a ball and re-roll it out. Now this second batch of dough here, it's going to be a little tougher, and it's probably going to be a little bit, now, maybe easier to roll, but it'll definitely be less sticky. First we got to get this into some semblance of a dough ball. So we'll just kind of fold it over, squash that down a little bit so that all the irregularities are sort of smoothed out. Okay, that's pretty good. So, put a little flour down again and get ready to roll. Same thing as before, nice and easy. You might have to put a little bit more of your back into it. You may notice that the dough has a tendency to spring back into shape even more so than it did before. That's because all that working of the dough creates what is very popular these days, gluten. And the gluten sort of acts as this rubbery substance that pulls it together. So every time you roll it out a little bit, it shrinks back, and it's due to the gluten. Alright, my second roll out of this dough seems to be about done. I'm going to cut a few more out of it. I managed to roll it a little bit more thin this time, and I think it's good. I think it might have been a little bit on the thick side my first time around, but we'll see. The proof is in the pierogi. Hey, look what I did here. I made squares. I figured would make better use of the remaining scrap that I had, so when I fold these over, they're going to be little triangles instead of semicircles. There you go. Okay, I'm going to start filling my first batch of these. So, I've got, this here is the sauerkraut filling I made last night. One addendum to this, by the way, the recipe actually called for some sour cream in here. I didn't have sour cream, so I put a little yogurt in there instead. I'm sure it'll work just great. Got myself a little bit of water here. I'm going to use this as a sealing agent to seal the edges of this thing. So, here goes nothing. Here's the first one. Put a little dollop in there. Put a little bit more. I want to make sure I get the filling to dough ratio correct here. This is where it's going to be tricky. Alright, so I'm going to take a little water and sort of pan it along the edge here. Make it sticky. Let's see. Fold this over. I'm going to sort of like press that shut. It actually looks pretty good. I'll make a nice scallop pattern along the edge. Now it's really looking like something. Now it's a fancy pierogi. Okay, now I made another batch of dough, and I'm getting ready to start filling these with the potato cheddar bacon filling. So, just put a little dollop in the center of each one of these, which is harder than it looks. Filling does not want to leave the spoon. Alright, I've got these all dolloped up and ready to go, so I'm going to start the process of sealing them up. Okay, I rolled out another batch of dough, cut out all my pierogi shells, and I'm ready to do my final filling. This is the one that I decided not to try to make myself. It's really pretty simple. Put the can down right there as I have, and you come in and you open it up. Remember to apply the proper amount of torque, use the proper tool, and there you go. It's ready to go. I'm going to start filling. Okay, I recommend using a spoon and a spatula because you'll notice that this stuff is pretty sticky. Chances are it's not going to come off the spoon that easily. It might need a little help. A little bit more. A little bit more. There, that looks pretty good. I'll do a bunch of them like that and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, what we have here are plates and trays filled with pierogi. We've got something like 6 dozen of them here. Now they need to sit for about 2 hours before I can start boiling them. So I filled a couple of pots. We have to put a little bit of salt in there too. Again, remember what I said before about keeping your blood pressure high for the holidays. Now here's the thing. I've never mass-produced pierogi before. I've got a whole bunch of them to boil. I'm not sure if my process is going to be any good or not. But I'm trying to equip myself with the proper tools. Got a slotted spoon. I've got another slotted spoon. I don't know if I'll need both, but I've got 2 hands, so might as well. I've got a bowl in which to put the finished product. I've got a couple of pots of water that are starting to boil. I've got a couple of colanders in case I need to know what day it is. That was a joke. I don't know if I'll use these colanders or not. Let's see how it goes. Alright, now the water's boiling in one of these pots, so I'm going to go ahead and start. As a little bit of a test, I'm just going to put a few in here at once and see how they go. I don't want them to stick together, I don't want them to fall apart, and let's see. They need to cook for 5 minutes or until they float, is what I'm told. We're going to do this really carefully at first, and then maybe if I get this figured out pretty well, we can start really cranking on them. Because I have a lot of these things to make. Look at them go. I'm a little bit afraid they're going to stick together, so I'm just jostling them a little bit to keep them apart. Okay, I boiled a couple of batches here, and some of them turned out a little bit misshapen. But this looks like a nice little batch here, and these just happen to be my triangular ones. I'm thinking maybe triangle is the way to go. I think these turned out better than the semicircular ones. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pull some of these out. Doesn't look too bad. Very nice. Slowly, the number of pierogis that I have to boil is dwindling away. It's a painstaking process, and not all of them are turning out that great, to tell you the truth. Some of them are coming apart. You and I have been on a pierogi journey. We've traveled far and wide. We've traveled from the mixing bowl to the boiling pot. Now we're going to the butter in the fry pan. Alright, we're going to give this a generous dollop of butter. And make sure you have more butter at hand because you cannot have too much butter. The new Boy Scout motto is be prepared with butter. Nope, not enough butter. Let's put some more in there. Alright, let's get some pierogi into the pan. While the pierogi are sauteing, it's a good opportunity to remind you to have a beverage. I feel like I've earned this one. So good. Now, those pierogi are getting some good color. They're probably just about done. Nice golden brown. I'll take them out of here and I'll start another batch of them. And there they are, a platter full of Easter pierogi. And they only took about 15 hours. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, to tell you the truth. But now, we get to eat them. Well, I am absolutely stuffed. All the pierogi have been cooked, they've been eaten, and now they're being digested. So thanks for joining me. Cheers. See you next Easter.